back in the day, there was Second Life concerts going on, probably still happens, but with popular folks like Chameleonaire came up into Second Life, Suzanne Vega came up into
You
Second
just
Life.
said popular and chameleonaire in the same sentence?
I had to reach, man. I had to reach.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
How was your fourth, man?
It's good. How about you?
It was good. We were out in Cali.
You were on the road last week. I'm gonna be on the road next week, which is pretty exciting. So we keep traveling the world, which I really like.
The world's aggressive, but yeah, that's you got to keep it fresh, keep things on tour.
COVID hurt our travel in the world, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Now we're more stateside. You know how we were talking TikTok investors last week?
Yes.
So I know TikTok wasn't around in 1994, but in 1994 I was like going on 12-ish, I think. I can imagine the TikTok of 1994 being like, yo, listen, little 12-year-old kid, if you buy GE now and wait till 2022, you'll be worth $7 billion. And do you know what $1 in GE purchased in 1994 would be worth today, Doogles?
Spit it.
$1.
Is this including dividends?
It's probably, this is a non-dividend reinvestment. But
still,
my joke didn't work out. Darn it.
Still,
yeah, isn't that amazing?
Didn't you tell me that you were at a party or something like that in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and someone did tell you to buy GE?
They said it's the only sure bet on Wall Street, and they worked on Wall Street. Yes.
So your hypothetical story occurred.
It did occur. Yeah, that's great, because they told me, I think this is early 2000s, that they're spitting that knowledge, if we can call it. And $1 in GE in the early 2000s, I'm trying to eyeball this chart here, is worth significantly less than $1 now.
Yeah. I mean, that was the wrong time, because that was right when Welch was getting out, right? And he just left. He saw a firestorm behind him and flew his private jet away from that thing. Said, Jeff, you can take it on. Still, regardless of the actual total returns dividends thing, the chart is ridiculous to look at.
It's just crazy to see. And that, the momentum doesn't continue forever. It makes you think about which darling today, whether it's Apple, Google, Microsoft, like, will look like a shell of itself in 15 years, 20 years from now.
And it's going to be most of them, probably. I mean, that's the thing. I don't think I sent this over to you, but I saw a pretty cool, I don't know what to call it. I want to call it a chart, but it was like a movie chart. So I don't know, like a moving images from Data is Beautiful that was showing the most popular websites, but it went month by month from 1993 to either 2020 or 2021, and just showed like number of unique visits by website by month. And it's like, it was like, moving between them. So the TikTok of 1994 was AOL, just as an FYI. But I'm going to send this over to you, and we'll put it on the Substack on Monday too. But it's interesting to watch the shift, right? And you see, there's one point where you see like the emergence of everything, the emergence of Yahoo just take over and dominate AOL.
Yeah.
Then you see Google come up. Then you see Yahoo come back.
Yeah.
And then you don't anymore. So it's cool. Man. I'll send it over to you. All right. Can I fishbowl reach?
Yeah, please.
I'm going to reach in the fishbowl, and I'm going to talk about Post Malone.
I'm excited.
Because Post Malone coming out with a new album, or maybe just came out with a new album, and he's holding a concert in partnership with Meta Platforms. So it's going to be a virtual concert that they're going to make into a film, it seems like, and release later on. I was reading this piece in Billboard, and at first I brought this up before. It took me so back into Second Life days, because, what have we discussed? We discussed how NFTs became a real big thing over the past couple of years. And Second Life had NFTs. You created virtual stuff. You owned it, right? And that ownership was tracked. Yep. The cryptocurrencies become a thing. Second Life had the Linden dollar, right, which was their own currency, not built on blockchain, their own currency. Anyway, concerts, man. Back in the day, there was Second Life concerts going on, probably still happens, but with popular folks like Chameleonaire came up into Second Life. Suzanne Vega came up into
You
Second
just
Life.
said popular and chameleonaire in the same sentence.
I had to reach, man. I had to reach, but anyway, so there were like concerts, and there was the whole like, can music become a thing? And record labels would get islands, like virtual land in there, and it didn't turn into anything right there. But Second Life musicians would still perform. Anyway, so harken back to those days. But where this is obvious, but the thing that reading this article that kind of clicked for me, that I said this might actually work. Maybe not concerts per se, but the metaverse with Meta doing it could actually work, is when they said Post Malone's going to be performing, and it's going to happen in Horizon World and live on Facebook and Instagram. And again, I know that that's obvious because Meta owns all this stuff, but I went, that we didn't have anywhere near that kind of reach because more important, I think, than Post Malone being able to broadcast in Horizon World. I think it is what it is. It's a gimmick, I think, at the end. But what's more important than that is there were so many, I'll go back to Second Life artists, like musicians that couldn't find their way in the real world that would only perform in Second Life. And that distribution channel never got big enough. And so now I'm thinking that you could actually have a world where people that maybe can't find their footing, have systemic issues or whatever, or don't feel comfortable making their way in the real world, might be able to start.
Well, so is your hypothesis here that Second Life did this all 20 years ago and it had limited success, never really turned into a thing? There's a lot of parallels, as we've talked about, to things that we've tried before, but this is attached to a user base of 2 to 3 billion people. And is that a potential game changer? Is that where you're going here?
Yeah, that's where I'm going. And so it's interesting. It's less about, because the beauty that I saw of Second Life was that there was this whole world that people that couldn't, whether it was for geographic reasons, political reasons, whatever, couldn't find their home, right, or their safety psychologically in the real world, could like do their thing and make a name for themselves in Second Life. Like, it was really cool to watch that, but it always stopped there.
Yeah.
And so now, again, Post Malone doing his thing, probably more of a gimmick. Great for him, makes more money, good. But I think it's more of the people that start in the virtual world being able to then foray into the real world, which is a shift that we could never make happen. So may or may not occur, I don't know. But reading this, and again, it's really obvious, but I was reading this, and just when I saw it's going to happen on Facebook and Instagram and Horizon World at the same time, I went, there's if they can get the metaverse right, because so far everything I've seen about their actual metaverse, I haven't used it, but everything I've seen seems like it's like worse than Second Life. But maybe not. I haven't tried it, but I was like, if they can get that right, I think there might be a there.
I mean, the games are fun. We have an Oculus, and my kids like it. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess my take is, if only it wasn't Post Malone.
that was your whole takeaway.
No, that was mostly a joke.
Yeah.
They
just need to buy Second Life. To be honest, I mean, he's spending so much money on this thing. Like, there's not even for, and sorry for any Second Life users that are listening to this, you are gonna hate the fact that I just said that, because it's it's sacred, right? Like, It is a sacred place for you. I'm talking business right here. If you're gonna spend so much money on the metaverse, just buy literally the talent. Like, it's not even about just buy it and like extract information.
Yeah.
Like, learn about 20 years of data that you have on, like, because you can look at the purchases that people make, when they make them, how many places they travel to, who does it, about real names versus fake names. Like, there's so much to learn just through that data. And Facebook is pretty good at mining data, right? I mean, that's like their thing. So,
well, listen, as a Meta shareholder over here, you remember that Will Smith movie where he can erase people's memory? What's that called? Is that an alien one?
Will Smith erasing memories?
Yeah, he has like this little light.
I mean, if he could do that, I think he should go back to
in real life.
You're talking about Men in Black.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I'm gonna get one of those gadgets. I'm gonna go over to Hawaii and find Zuck, and I'm gonna do that thing and erase Metaverse from his memory, so he could actually just spend money on the core business that makes decent returns. So I don't want him to buy Second Life.
Okay. So as a Meta shareholder, yes, I hear you. Also, though, with all that's happening in the ad business right now, don't you think that it's interesting to have some other potential revenue avenues that aren't the internet?
Wait, the Metaverse isn't the internet?
No, I'm sorry. I meant like the two-dimensional internet, the old internet. It's also just the internet, but you know what I mean.
Are you making a bullish case for the Metaverse as a business investment?
Dude, up until I read this Billboard piece, Post Malone has opened my eyes.
What wasn't it like 20 episodes ago that you were like totally trashing the whole idea and say that it was already tried?
Yeah, I was like, you tried this stuff because at the time they were talking about like board meetings and all this stuff. I was like, we've done that. That's no good. You're right. Yeah. I was saying it's been tried, and then I remembered that they own Facebook and Instagram, like the most obvious.
And now you're on the Zuck train. This is okay.
I should tell Zuck about this. Maybe he doesn't know that they also own Facebook. And
hey, Zuck, did you forget it? You're on Facebook. Yeah. It's like this pretty.
Get the sunscreen. Get the sunscreen out of your eyes. Anyway, yeah, no, it really did. It turned me. Bullish is probably too aggressive, right? But it something did click, where I was like, okay, I think there could be something there that when you look at what Second Life didn't have, because it's easy to say Second Life had the 20-year head start, if you want to say that, or like 20 years of evidence that maybe this couldn't work. But I hadn't thought enough about what does Meta have that Linden Lab didn't and doesn't have.
I mean, I'm just excited. I think we got some content for our end of year. Doogles sticks his foot in his mouth segment here. This is great, because whatever happens here, I'm gonna pull the clip of you saying the opposite and then call it good.
But I think that last episode was actually in 2021, so that's old Doogles. That's old Doogles.
All right, we need to switch gears here before we get in trouble. We've talked about food deserts on the show, and food deserts are fascinating to me. That often ties back to our dollar store conversations, which seem to happen way too much. And Axios had a piece this week talking about news deserts that I found interesting. And so because a lot of local newspapers are shutting down, they're seeing more and more news deserts. And within those news deserts, I mean, this makes sense from a business perspective, but it's kind of sad on a socioeconomic lens, I'd say. So in a news desert, the average annual income for a home is $15,000 less than the average U.S. household. And only 20% of adults living in a news desert have a bachelor's degree, compared to 38% for all of the U.S. So like, it makes sense, right? The most economically challenged places are the ones that have a hard time making the economics of a newspaper or internet news source work, and therefore they end up in a news desert, which has other ramifications. It's just kind of sad to see. I don't know, I hadn't heard that term and wanted to mention it.
And it does, to the point you're alluding to there, it does seem like that's a cycle. It's like a self-reinforcing cycle where you're in this situation, less educated, aren't as economically on solid footing. Then you have less access to news of the outside world, which doesn't help with the education and learning piece.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I hadn't really thought about news deserts too, because, and this is often, getting stuck in bubbles. Let's talk about, my own bubble getting stuck in, where it seems like content is everywhere. Like, how do I get away from all the news and the content? And that's not where, I can't even say that's not where everyone is. That's not where a significant material portion of people actually are.
Exactly. And in a news desert, you're even more likely to, we just talked social media, right? You're even more likely to go to social media, which is kind of this person to this person to this person saying, and believe that to be like the true fact-based, fact-checked news, and it's just not. So that reminds me of another thing, which is a book I read this week called Nickeled and Dimed. And Doogles, it's hilarious that you also picked up this book and just haven't read it yet. So I'm going to throw a couple tidbits your way, and then we might do a deep dive if you find it interesting on a later podcast episode. So the basis here is a journalist. This is 20 years ago now. Like this is 99 and 2000, but she wanted to put herself in the shoes of a minimum wage worker, basically. So she went to 3 different locations, Maine, Florida, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, and worked jobs as either a waitress, a maid. She worked at Walmart, and there's a few other odd jobs. Basically, at every location, she had to have 2 jobs. She often worked 6 to 7 days a week. Really fascinating to read, but some stats in there that jumped off the page at me. First is regarding drug testing. She has a hypothesis that drug testing might just be one of those extra obstacles that's put in place to make it more difficult for your worker who maybe doesn't have access to a car to actually get to the drug test, which might be 25 minutes away by car, and vice versa. So here's the stat, though, that she pulls out about the federal government's drug testing for these lower income jobs. This is from 1990. In 1990, the federal government spent almost $12 million to test 29,000 federal employees, and only 153 tested positive, meaning the government was spending $77,000 per positive test.
This goes back to your whole, where are you spending your money, government? Can you please just spend it more wisely?
I mean, or like we're talking about jobs in the late 2000s that were making $7 an hour. Can you imagine if you paid those people $12 million more and just fired the occasional folk that showed up like drunk or high?
Yeah, no, this stuff, I don't know. It makes me pretty angry. So instead I'll just chuckle about it right here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no easy fixes here. The next one relates to rents. We've talked a lot about housing, but if you're making $7 an hour, or today $15 an hour, your rental income is going to take up even a larger portion of your total disposable wealth, right? And so the study here says that 59% of poor renters, which amounts to more than 4.4 million households, were spending more than 50% of their income on shelter.
That's, I mean, unsustainable.
It's completely unsustainable.
Like, that's frightening. Like living in that way, not by choice.
Not at all by choice.
It's frightening, right? Because that's different than the folks that are like YOLO interest rates. Let me buy a $5 million house when I'm making $100,000 a year or something. That's different than that. This is like, let me try and find a place that I can afford, but this is the cheapest place that I can find for my family to be safely, and it's 50% of your income.
And you'll see that safety often goes out the door.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call these places safe or nice. A lot of them don't have a refrigerator or other things, so that changes the dynamic of what you can have in your diet for the worse, and then so often makes it more expensive as well, because you can't go buy, perishable meats or fruits because you don't have a place to store it. You're going place to place, and you're often working at least 2 jobs that are fairly physically demanding. So the last thing I'll mention, and then we can loop back when you finish the read. It's a little scary that we both picked up the same book without talking about it.
Yeah,
and the same book happens to be 20 years old.
Yeah, that's really weird. It's really weird.
So I don't know what's going on here, but the thing I always had a hard time reconciling it, and still do to a certain extent, is like this just economics, right? This just supply demand equation of like, why are there people willing to take $15? Well, no, in today's world, it's probably more like, in some places, people are willing to take a $12 an hour job. But a $12 an hour job, there's no way you could possibly have a decent place to live, food, like the bare necessities, which goes to this classification of the working poor, right?
Yep.
there's a belief in America, especially if you go back to like the 50s and 60s, that if you work hard, part of the American dream is if you work hard, you have what you need to be like middle class. And that's gone out the window in a way, with some of these really low income jobs where it doesn't matter if you work 60 hours a week, you still don't have enough money to pay the bills. What I think she articulately points out, which I really thought, but I want your take on, is I just thought this was so interesting, is it's not a true free market at that scale of the socioeconomic like employment space. It's not a free market for a lot of reasons. It's not a free market because you might not have the transportation you need to get to the place that pays $15 an hour instead of $12 an hour. It's not a free market because you might be taking care of your grandparents or young kids. Maybe there's childcare burdens that don't work. It's not a free market for so many reasons that some people take the Walmart job because they managed to have a place that's walking distance to Walmart, and the only job they can have is one that they can walk through. Like, there's just so many restrictions in a lot of cases that it changes the dynamics, where it's not necessarily about a person saying this is a fair wage. A person might be saying this is the only thing that meets my current circumstances, and I know it's not fair.
Yeah, that's real talk, man. Like real talk. I also, something you might be interested in, I read a book either this year or last year, I can't remember, but it came out 2 or 3 years ago, called On the Clock. And it was written by, I'm gonna get this wrong, but for those, if you want to search, Emily Gundelsberger, something like that.
Okay.
And similarly, reporter took jobs at like a call center, like an outsourced call center, Amazon. There were a couple others, McDonald's, and I think one more. They took and wrote about the experience of it. From what you're saying with nickel and dimed, and I'll read it very soon, so I'll be able to compare directly. It seems like the styles of the books were a bit different. Like, she wrote more about, I would say it was kind of like the personal, like the micro environments. That's what she talked about, and didn't touch on the macro, which maybe this author did both, but she just kind of touched on like the micro. It's like, what is the day-to-day exactly like? What are the relationships with other people like? How do my bosses treat me? Was like more of what that book was about. But I found it to be pretty interesting. This is so important for people to understand and recognize. I'm glad you brought up the book, because you mentioned the news desert thing with people that don't have access to information, and there's people that do have access to all the information, but generally don't consume or take to heart, at least, like that type of environment and what people are facing there. So thank you.
It's interesting to me that, gosh, interesting is the wrong word. I mean, like, I just have so much to learn, and I'm a person that has an investing podcast and tries to read 3 books a month, and there's still things like, and I have a minor in economics, and I have my MBA, and like, I have all this. I should be more educated than your average person on some of these market dynamics, and in certain cases I'm not. So there really is a ton to learn, and it's a good book. I recommend it. It's called Nickel and Dimed. So
what did lead us both to pick up this 20-year-old book at the same time? That is, it's wild. I'm excited to read it.
I think there's a subliminal marketing campaign going on. I mean, mine was at Barnes and Noble, so I just like picked it up off.
Wait, did you buy it 20 years ago?
No.
You said Barnes and Noble.
I'm done. I went to Barnes and Noble this week. We're completely off the rails.
All right.
Bring us back to some investing talk.
I will. All right. So I'm going to reach into the fishbowl. And speaking of market dynamics, and something we discussed a few months back, I'm going to talk about Black folks in crypto. So funny enough, this is a 2-for-1 special here. 2-for-1 special, because I just went and looked up what episode we discussed this on.
Yeah.
And it was episode 44, which was called Zuck is officially off his rocker. So this is both the episode that we discussed this and the episode where I trashed Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse. So interesting. 2-for-1 special. What we talked about then was there was this really fascinating Time article that came out that was discussing how African Americans and minorities in general were getting heavily involved in crypto. And something that we said at the time was it was kind of two sides to it. We said, wonderful to get involved. And like, it's awesome that people see like liberation and freedom, right, in this new system. And it's often the same folks that end up getting hurt the most when this new speculative thing crashes down, right? And I'm not trying to imply that like crypto as a whole is going away or has gone to zilch, but this article in the Financial Times called "Crypto Collapse Reverberates Widely Among Black American Investors" is saying like what we said. So one stat from it: a quarter of Black American investors owned cryptocurrencies at the start of the year. A quarter, right? There's this.
Well, they were more represented than. I mean, they really dived in like good and bad way. Bad now that the crash has come, because I'm sure there's economic ramifications, but cool that there was the curiosity and the desire to like explore that new investing approach.
Yeah. Yes. And that's the whole thing, like the macro point, and it ties directly to what you were just talking about, was that there are many people, right, in the country, that many of them minorities, maybe mostly, right, minorities, that feel either excluded or violated, right, by the quote unquote traditional financial systems, like the banking systems. All the financial institutions have effectively like screwed them over. And so there's a fear, right? There's a distrust that exists. And so you have this new thing that pops up around cryptocurrency. And like, this is something that we can own. Like, we can make this ours. We can, like, that's the liberation and freedom, right, that we talked about. And so we discussed that. And it's like, there's such a beauty that exists in that. Like, it's really awesome. And right, I'm making up a stat here. This is completely made up. What I'm about to say: 99% of Bitcoin's owned by the Winklevoss twins and Michael Saylor, right? And so, not really. That's not true.
And it's incredibly volatile. It doesn't have dividends. There's no cash backstop. So like, it's on the spectrum of risk. It is on the very high end, and it's much easier to be classified as a speculative asset than it is as an investable asset.
Exactly. And now that we've had many cryptocurrencies that have gone either to zero or down by 60%, 70%, like there's this major downturn that's happening right now. I'll name a couple stories that were named in this article. One is there's this guy, Jefferson Noel. He's 27. And he said back in January of 19, he accidentally bought $5 of Bitcoin while using Square's Cash App. And so he got this $5, didn't realize he bought this $5. And then last May, so like what would that would have been like 2.5 years later?
Yeah.
He sees that his $5 had turned into $70. And he's like, what? Like, that's insane. So he talked to some friends about it. He's like, yo, homie, what's going on? Right. And then they said, you know, that $20,000 you have saved, what you should do,
oh man,
is throw that in Doge.
No, not Doge. No,
I don't think it was only Doge, but Doge was
was
a bunch of it. So he got other cryptocurrencies. Dogecoin says it did get some index funds as well, but it seems like it was mostly cryptocurrencies. And his quote, so that hasn't turned out well. Let me just go to the end. But the quote that this Jefferson fellow says, he says, Black Americans do not want to be left behind again. As far as I can tell, the Black community sees crypto as a way to even the playing field and get in the game before the gatekeepers prevent others from participating. That gets back to like the fear in systems thing. So that's one story.
Yeah.
A second one, Dennis McKinley, 41, has been buying the dip. This is in crypto, against the advice of his financial advisor. He said his crypto coins now constitute roughly 30% of his overall portfolio. We don't know how this is going to turn out, right? So Dennis and Michael Saylor could be hanging out on Nectar Island.
Yeah.
Right.
120 years from now.
120 years. Yeah, we don't know how it's going to turn out. But the thing that just keeps coming to mind for me is, independent of how this turns out, like, it's not smart. Like it's really not smart, because the outcomes don't always mean that you made the right choice at the right time in either direction, right? On the up or on the down. But it was something that hit me for those that only listen to this because you can only listen to this, right? We don't have video. I'm a black man. And I had always had this this view, like when I was probably from like the mid 90s on, I was like, I want to take the world by storm and like create all kinds of wealth and hit all the home runs. Like I had this view, right? And then at some point, this was probably maybe like 15 or so years ago, the importance of compounding like came into my mind. Like as I started like seeing the world and like reading stuff and saying, when I see the people that I financially was saying I wanted to emulate, many times they've created this over generations.
Yeah.
Or right. And I went, actually, what's going to be important is for me to like not have my family, my son in this case, start as a bat boy. Like if he can start even between first and second base or on second base, great. And then he can build off of that. And so that's the important thing. Like it's, you don't gotta nail it right now.
No, you got to build a solid foundation. And that's like, sorry, I didn't think we were going to American Dreamland, but this is where we ended up. If you go back to the Nickel and Dimed book, like one of the things that I'm most proud of in my family history is like, you know, my grandfather was a janitor who worked 2 jobs, who built a foundation for my father, who built a foundation for me. Like it feels like the American dream, right? And when I read a book like that, that feels like that's not even available to a certain section of the population, the way we've structured our economic principles, like that just doesn't seem okay. It doesn't seem okay for people to have good, worthy jobs working 65 hours a week and still be classified as the working poor. In a lot of cases, be classified as people that still get like crazy government assistance because they don't even meet basic thresholds for standards of what's okay on the food and housing front. And that leads to medical issues and it leads to everything else. So I don't know. I'm totally with you, man. It's like, it's just not okay.
And I won't talk about this much on the pod here because we'll go way down into topics that this pod's not about. But if you didn't read the Bloomberg article that I sent over to you last Sunday, read that.
Okay.
It's about basically taking land away from Black people in South Carolina, but it's similar thread where how do you build that foundation when you can't build that foundation? Yeah. Oh man, messed up. All right, onward.
What's in your movie?
Well, I'm happy to touch on something that's related, a little bit related briefly. So there's a Wall Street Journal piece by J.J. McCorvey called Millennials Were Optimistic About Their Financial Future. Now, not so much. A reason I say this is similar is because my message that I like want to send after this, and I'll talk about what it's about in a second here, is it's the same thing. You don't got to do it all now, people. You've got time. So in this article, what JJ writes about is JJ was saying I don't know how old he is, but he's young and was riding this long bull market. His friends were riding the bull market. Pandemic happened. And there was the Great Resignation. And it basically made it such that people that thought millennials that thought that they were in this place of like financial freedom, grab the bull, literal the bull, maybe not literally, but the stock market bull by its horns, now in a place where they're facing a potential recession. There's a stock market slump. In one case, he talks about a friend who left their job to join a nonprofit, took a pay cut, but increased their housing costs. And now they're like terrified. And they're like, what the heck do I do? How do I get back on financial footing? JJ specifically himself said he was, and I quote, treating my 401k balance like a plague, but then decided to rip the Band-Aid off and take a peek. Looked at his 401k balance, didn't like what the 401k showed. Then Googled, how much should I have in my 401k at my age? Saw how much he should have, saw how much he does have, and said, crap, I'm behind. And I was like, JJ, where you at? Because I wanted to find JJ and say, JJ, you have a 401k. Like that's where it's at. You're young. You got it. Maybe you're behind, but keep contributing. Just let it grow. What you don't need to do, and I don't know if JJ is going to do this, but what you don't need to do is invest that in crypto, or like pull it out and take the penalty to take risks to catch up. You don't need to do that. Just keep going. And I just kind of feared when I read this that if millennials, and this seems like it's more on like the younger side of millennials, not the geriatrics, the younger side of millennials, don't feel like you don't have a future or potential retirement when you are like 30 because of a 20 or 30% market downturn.
Well, okay, there's a lot here, right? One is, it's hilarious in life. You know, a lot of times we make a call and we're like close to the target. In a situation like this, people throw the dart and they throw it backwards. If the dartboard's in front of them, they throw it into the ocean backwards. Like, they miss the point so much. Falling markets for a young investor is a really, really good thing.
It's a great thing.
Should, if you're 25 years old right now, you should be rooting for the thing to go down 70%. You seriously should. And you should hope that it stays down there for the next 10 years while you can dollar cost average into the thing, spending money on every paycheck. If that happens, you're going to be so wealthy by the time you retire, you won't even know what to do. What's bad for you is the last 12 years, extremely, the US stock market being one of the most expensive stock markets in the world, a 12-year bull market. Those are all terrible. So I'm with you on, if we're having a beer with JJ, like, now's the time to get excited. Now's the time. Yeah, if you're behind a little, maybe you figure out if you can up your contributions, but it's just really important to stay the course. And if you stay the course, you get this massive benefit from being able to ride through the volatility that other people miss, because a lot of people do that exact same thing and they check their balance and they feel like they're behind. And then they make rash decisions that cost them more money that put them further behind.
That's exactly right. I nailed it. And JJ, I didn't mention this, but so JJ's Black too. So going back to what we were talking about, and JJ, I'm going to find this quote. Hold on. He says, "The specter of a possible future in which I become a part of the 83% of Black Americans who lack sufficient retirement assets wasn't only looming over me, but was tapping me on the shoulder and whispering, 'Get it together.'" I get that mentality, but to what you just said, like, you have a 401k, JJ. Like, this is the time. Just this is when I say this is the time, what I mean is, I don't mean this is the time to like go and do something crazy. I mean, this is the time for mental fortitude, for you to like understand that this stuff happens and that it is a feature. Like, it's a great feature of the markets for younger folks, right? And just like, you're doing your thing, man. Just keep doing it. And you're writing for the Wall Street Journal too. Shoot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, totally. This is the volatility, the pain that comes with losing money, like happened in the first half of 22, is that's how you get 7% return over 50 years, or 10%, or whatever it ends up being. If you could go to a bank and get a guaranteed 10% return with no I mean, you can't. The reason why is because people would do that instead of investing in ownership of companies. This is how you get there.
Exactly.
So,
all right, should we end on a positive note?
Yes, we should. This is kind of a depressing episode. I don't even know that I want to listen to this one, Dougal.
End it with a bang. What's up in the fishbowl?
Like, only one Post Malone joke so far. I don't think there's been any other jokes. It's all seriousness about the decaying American dream. You sent this my way. So Full Stack Economics did a breakdown of 24 charts that show we're mostly better off than our parents were. So this is our generation. Could be folks like JJ, who we just talked about. And it basically compares living standards today to living standards in the 80s. There's a lot here, Doogles. I mean, I don't want to, maybe we'll just hit on a few highlights and see if anything is super interesting to us. But we have better access to fruits and vegetables, significantly better access to fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. And can I stop you on this chart for 1 second?
Yeah.
So by significantly, let's talk about blueberries. Let's talk about so blueberries is an antioxidant. People need oxygen. And I feel like the fact that we're eating 8 times more blueberries than we did 30 years ago might be too much. This might be too much.
Yeah. Blueberries is off the chart. Oh, you want to go into the tangents here. So on the vegetables front, avocados are up 400% in the last 30 years. And we all know that avocados are horrible. They're stealing all of Chile's water, and like the avocados, people get killed for avocados all over the world simply so Americans can have avocado toast. That's up too much in my opinion as well. We're spoiled.
We are very spoiled. And how much of that is on toast? That's like just like when the fruit with limes. I want to see limes with and without margaritas. Like how much are
basically
limes
just margarita consumption? That's
yeah. All right, keep going.
I mean, the cost of a TV is down 94%. Why don't we just like give these things away? So much is cheaper. This is a comparison. I mean, paint, car batteries, hammers are down 63%. Electric leaf blowers are 81% cheaper. Window AC down 83%. And the comparison for this chart, Doogles, is from a Sears catalog in 1980. Isn't that so great? That's where they got their prices.
Oh, it's wonderful. The other one that blew my mind here is looking at inflation adjusted prices for some goods and services. So at tuition and childcare, medical care, energy, rent, food at home, durable goods and apparel. And you've got durable goods and apparel that are down 50%. Inflation adjusted prices down 50% since 1990. Tuition and childcare were more than double. Inflation adjusted.
Yeah.
More than double what they were over 30 years ago. We've talked about both of those actually here, tuition more on the pod, but that is buck wild. And that continues for me. Childcare continues to be this industry that baffles me because I always feel like the spend of the individual is so much more than what the other side gets.
Oh, well, yeah. Let's keep going. So in Nickeled and Dimed, one of her jobs is a maid, and she works as for one of the services, like the Merry Maids, where they have their own cars and everything else, right?
Yep.
They're typically charging their clients $25 an hour, roughly, per worker, and their workers at the time were making like $675. It's a good chunk that's not going to the working poor. Right. And I feel like that happens in childcare as well. I think, I mean, this is really complex. There's no easy fixes, but one of the simplest fixes, if you support one of those services, is maybe try and take out the middleman for childcare or cleaning services, because.
Well, that's why this word is always difficult for me to pronounce, but the risk that marketplaces like that are always trying to mitigate is disintermediation. Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try again. I got it. Because what happens is you find that caretaker or you find that cleaner on the marketplace, and then they go off platform.
Yep.
Because there's 70% or whatever, 30%, depending on the platform, right? There's a significant amount that's not going to the end user or, the end benefactor there. So that
on this chart, the 50% drop in durable goods and apparel. I mean, these people clearly aren't buying Patagucci, Doogles. Like,
what? Excuse me? Who?
Patagucci.
Well, first of all, buying and apparel are two words that I never have in the same.
Oh gosh. And what does that apparel drop mean? Does that mean we just outsource more of our
it might.
Labor related to apparel?
Yeah, there's like a going back to your avocado point. God, I should just keep it positive. But going back to your avocado point, there's probably like this is Americans living better than their parents, but like, what are the global externalities? like what is the rest of the impact on rest of world?
Yeah, right. Exactly. This
we don't
is
need to talk. We can just keep
American
talking about avocados though. We can keep talking about avocados.
According to chart 10 on this, the welfare and tax programs have boosted incomes for the top and bottom. So per capita income across all income levels is up about 40%, according to this chart, since 1990, which is interesting. But for the top 20%, it's up more than 50%, as well as for the bottom 20%. it's up more than 50%. The middle 60% is only up about 28% since 1990. This is a really interesting chart. I don't know what it means per se, but it seems like the tax and welfare programs are targeting like the barbell of the top and bottom, and the middle is kind of being forgotten in a way.
The other thing in this one is it shows a hourly earnings of production and non-supervisory employees line, which is up, call it 15-16% roughly here. If you look at the difference between that and income being up, what you have there basically is investment income of various parts, right? Because you have, that's the R is greater than G, right yonder.
True.
Right yonder, R is greater than G, right? R is greater than G, we talk about all the time. It's that the rate of growth as capital is higher than the rate of growth of income or of wages. And you can see that right here. Like, that is the difference.
Yes. A lot more people have washing machines, washers and dryers, dishwashers, central AC. I don't think any of that's a surprise. There's a lot of McMansions in this country. We can debate if that's a good or a bad thing. But what appears to be interesting relative to that is that even though homes have gotten significantly bigger since 1980, apartments are now starting to pull back. Since 2007, the average size of an apartment is actually shrinking a little.
That's interesting. And there was something else around home ownership being cheaper, but rent not? Let's see if I can find that one.
Yeah, home ownership did get cheaper, in large part because of how low interest rates were. So the mortgage payment came down, and then rent has basically hung right near hourly wages. I think until recently, I think rents are up significantly in the past 2 years in a way that's separating from hourly wages. And that's going to be a challenge that probably brings rents back down, in my opinion.
You know what this positivity reminds me of, this factual positivity reminds me of, is a book we talked about early last year, Factfulness.
Yeah.
Which at the highest of high levels was like, one, look at numbers correctly so you understand what's going on, right? Always look at the absolute value and also something that's relative. And two, the numbers over the longer term, actually the world's getting better. We often focus on the stuff that's getting worse, and it's important to actually dive into the stuff that's getting worse so you can fix it, but don't just like look at the headlines of the stuff that's getting worse. But we often do that, but recognize that stuff is also getting better. How do we double down on the better and make the worse better?
Exactly. Well, guys, this was a interesting show. We did a mini book report, talk of the American dream. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. Easiest place, one-stop shop, is skippydoogles.com. Substack subscription sends you all the articles we talk about each week, each Monday. It's a really handy thing. So that's skippydoogles.substack.com. And please rate and review the podcast if you get a chance. Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.